Implausible Nature now has dice. That's right, you can get these awesome D6s made by our partner, Baron of Dice. These custom dice have the Implausible Nature logo on the 6 side and also come with square corners, which means they will roll more evenly than rounded corner dice. Head on over to baronofdice.com and use discount code IN40K to get a discount on your order and support us at the same time. Check out his full collection of dice for all your gaming needs with the link down in the description. Welcome to Implausible Nature, your home for all things Black Templar. On today's video, we are talking about a topic given to us by one of our patrons. Thank you, Tom, for this suggestion. He asks, what is the pros and cons of going traditional melee Templars versus playing into the meta with a more shooty focus? So I think this also really kind of boils down to another question that a lot of people have been asking, which is, do we go with the Gladius detachment or do we go with our Righteous Crusader detachment? Because generally speaking, if you're going to run Gladius, you're going to want a more shooting focused army because of some of the synergies it has, versus Templars. I feel like our Righteous Crusaders detachment lends itself obviously to more melee, given all the buffs that it has for melee. So we're going to kind of dive in to that today, talk about the two different detachments, the pros and cons of both, and which one we think is going to be the best option for you, for your Black Templars. So to get us started off, we are going to talk about the Gladius detachment. So obviously this is the generic Space Marine detachment. It has combat doctrines, which you can choose in your command phase. You choose one. There's Devastator, Tactical, and Assault. They each have different bonuses. You can only pick each one of them once per game. So Dev gives a shoot in which it advanced. Tactical lets you shoot and declare a charge, in which a turn in which you fell back, and Assault is advance and charge. All of these are army-wide when they go off, so some pretty powerful buffs. Obviously, the one that's most appealing to us is the Assault Doctrine, because advance and charge, something that was long hoped for Black Templars, is available in this detachment. Just taking a look at the detachment rule itself, Bob, what are your thoughts on that?
So this lends to a more balanced list, so to speak, as far as army list construction from a Black Templar's perspective, simply because there is more synergies, as you talked about, in the shooting phase than there is in the Righteous Crusader phase, as well as having a little bit of that close combat prowess in the Assault Doctrine. And it's not a direct buff to melee or damage or anything like that, but it does have the movement shenanigans that is very beneficial to an army to allow it to do some crazy stuff if you build your list correctly. It also gives you tactical flexibility throughout the game, allowing you to do, for example, Devastator Doctrine. You can shoot after you advanced, or in Tactical, you can also shoot and declare charge after you fell back. So you have some tools in your tool chest that you can actually use to gain tactical advantage, which is kind of a handy thing. Going further on this one, we have obviously our stratagems in the Tactical Task Force. So this again is more well-rounded, but we do have some duplicates in, or very similar stratagem. So obviously Armor Contempt we both have in both of these detachments, as you'll notice. In Only Death Does Duty End, that is the Gladius version.
Of our fights last, or fight on death.
Yep. So we do have a similar version,
It
with
is
that.
uh it is more reliable, the Only in Death, because it's automatic. You don't have to roll for it. However, it does also cost 2 CP. So, it's definitely more costly to get that, guaranteed fight on death.
Yep. And then there's Honor the Chapter, which is one of the few melee buffs that they have in the stratagem, which gives your melee weapons lance. And if you're in the Assault Doctrine, you can also get an additional armor penetration. So, I mean, that is decent with 1 CP. That'll give you that melee buff. We also have Adapted Strategy, which allows you to have that combat doctrine active for that unit instead of other ones. Squad Tactics, which is very similar to our Devout Push as
Mhm.
far as that goes. Not enough changes to really talk about it. But the big one, and one that is probably going to be most used for many, many people for this particular uh, detachment, is Storm of Fire, which allows you to have ignores cover on one of your units for that shooting phase. And if you're in Devastator Doctrine, you also increase your armor penetration, which is pretty big with shooting because a lot of your weaponry that you're going to be using as a Space Marine in the shooting phase is low AP.
Yep.
So,
Especially things like grav guns are only AP 1. So, something like this really definitely helps them out with stuff like that. So AP down is pretty much down across the board. So getting that extra AP is pretty nice. Something to note with these stratagems is, unlike the Righteous Crusaders detachment, it only the second part where you get like that extra bonus. Like for example, Storm of Fire. It says if your unit is under the effects of the Devastator Doctrine until the end of the phase, improve AP, etc. Right? It's not written the same way as Righteous Crusaders. Righteous Crusaders, your army has to be under the effects of that vow, not the unit. Which, similar to adaptive strategy, we can give a second vow to another unit. This one, you just have to be under the effects of Devastator. So even if you've already used Devastator Doctrine that turn or this game, you can use adaptive strategy and then Storm of Fire to get the effects of that extra AP, which is pretty nice. That's definitely a plus over our detachment with their strats here on this.
yeah, absolutely. So, as you can see, there's a little bit of well-roundedness here, and which is,
What you'd
you know,
expect.
yeah, what you would expect for a generic Space Marine list.
Mhm.
So, it's not great at any one thing, but it has some tools for every type of army that you would want to build.
Yep.
The problem is and this is one of the cons we'll talk about with the Righteous Crusaders, is if you want to go all in on some shooting, there's no tools for you in the Righteous Crusader. So you really kind of want to build towards the Gladius. And what really makes that tick even more than the Storm of Fire is if we take a look at our enhancements. And I'll start off with the one that everyone probably knows at this point, and if you don't, it is Bolter Discipline. So enhancements have to be taken on a generic character.
Yep.
But it's just the one model. And while the bearer is leading a unit, range weapons equipped by the model in that unit have sustained hits 1 ability. If it's under the effects of the Devastator Doctrine, each time a model in that unit makes a range attack, the unmodified hit roll of 5+ is a critical hit. So you're getting sustained hits on 5
Fives.
pluses.
Yep.
So that's very, very powerful. Some of those nerfs took place for Death Watch because of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's still really powerful. You combine that with numerous different lists. We'll talk about it because we have some example lists that we'll be bringing up here. But you can take some really big combos with these things and make it very
Yeah.
powerful.
Desolation squads, Hellblasters are both really good targets for this. You'll probably want to stick either an apothecary or even like a lieutenant with them. The apothecary is the popular choice because he brings guys back, especially
Yep.
for the Hellblasters. It's particularly hilarious because they shoot on death. So they shoot on death, and then he brings them back to life.
Yep.
so, so yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, as good as this enhancement is, it is pretty much the only enhancement realistically worth taking. The others are okay. They really kind of only buff, the bearer, um, and it's. It's just really kind of like mediocre buffs from the other three, so they're not really all that great. I think we have better options within Righteous Crusaders as far as it being worth taking our enhancements. But that being said, I mean, Bolter Discipline is amazing. It's hands down easily the um, best enhancement in this detachment. So.
Yep.
Um, so yeah.
One thing I would note with this detachment, so while the movement shenanigans are really nice in this, as mentioned earlier, you can only use them once per turn, or once per
Per game.
battle for
Yeah.
a turn. So you're pretty much hamstrung into using adaptive strategy on your key shooting unit all game. So
Yep.
you're going to be using a lot of CP to maintain your Devastator Doctrine on that particular unit. So you get the effects of the Bolter Discipline and Storm of Fire, which also is going to take more CP. So that's very CP intensive uh, detachment to maintain your combination. So you're not going to be able to utilize some of these other stratagems in your detachment because you're going to be wanting to have adaptive strategy up for all 5
Whatever
turns,
your
probably.
and on whatever your like uber shooting unit is, whether it's Desolation, Marines, basically whatever unit has the Bolter Discipline, you're going to want to have adaptive strategy up all game for it, so that you can really benefit from the ability, the 5+.
Yep.
So so yeah, so those are the specifics of the detachment. Um, let's talk about what kind of list we would run that would favor a Gladius detachment. Obviously, we talked about a couple of units that pair really well with that enhancement. But what about the rest of the list, Bob? What should we be looking out for or thinking to include if we think we want to run the Gladius?
All right. So if you're running Black Templars, you really do want to have something that can utilize the advance and charge. So that's going to be something that you want to think about as far as that goes. Because again, you can't have Devastator Doctrine up for all of your units for the whole game. And really, to make use of the shenanigans that the Gladius detachment allows you to have, you want to be able to have a well-rounded list, right? So we do have a list that was generously donated to us by Orion, who has been a guest on our channel for several times here.
Also a patron of ours. Thank you very
Yep.
much for your support.
So you'll see the list here on the screen. Alex will put that in, and we'll kind of follow along. But it features 2 apothecaries, Biologus and the standard Primaris apothecary, and then we have Chaplain Grimaldus. Battle line is your big boy Crusader squad. So Grimaldus is going to be running with that guy, holding that center of the board. That is the piece of the puzzle that utilizes your assault doctrine.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this guy is going to be, they're losing scout, but they gain advance and charge. So that is going to be giving a really large, very durable unit the ability to get across the board without having to use Grimaldus's ability on it.
Yep.
So that means he can stay
With the feel
utilizing
no
that
pain.
feel no pain,
Yep.
or if you need additional AP.
Hmm.
So that is a benefit to the Gladius.
Yep.
You also have 2 Lancers, and then that nasty Desolation squad that we talked about. This is post nerf, so the points are still going to be that 10-man, but you're going to have the Apothecary there with the Bolter Discipline enhancement. So what that allows you to do is combo your Storm of Fire, so you're going to be able to ignore cover with your out of line of sight shooting and increase the armor penetration of those guns. So that is going to be significantly better on that. Plus, because they are firing so many shots at you, you're going to be also pumping in the sustained hits with that Bolter Discipline. So you're going to be generating a massive amounts of firepower from this unit.
Yep.
So it doesn't have to see anything because it's all line of sight. And if something comes into range, you can use that anti-tank weaponry to blast it off the board. You do have the Eradicator squad. That is going to be comboed with the Biologus to allow them to address any monsters and or vehicles that need to be taken. Those guys are going to be comboed into together and put into strategic reserves so that they have the ability to stay protected and come onto the board in strategic parts of the board. You have to be very careful with these guys, but you know, come on strategically. Infiltrator squad, a shooty unit that can aerial denial. This is going to be your Gene Stealer cult aerial denial, which is going to be very important.
Yep.
So you have 2 of those suckers. That's how important it is, right? Make sure those Gene Stealers don't get up in your grill too early. Scout Sniper Squad. We've talked about these guys before, so they're very good. They can't be shot unless you're within 12 inches, which allows them to be not targeted by out of line of sight stuff. So that is really huge, and they can hold your home field advantage or home field objective.
Yep. And they could sit up
Finally,
exposed in a tower in a tall ruin or something like that, and not
yep.
worry about return fire.
And they also give you that precision, so you can take out
Yeah.
something that is really important to your opponent.
Yeah.
Thunderfire Cannon. So you may be thinking, hey, why do we have a Thunderfire Cannon in this list? But, you know, really they are there to slow down those fast armies that want to get to the center of the board real quick, like our Custodes. That's a really tough matchup for us because of how durable those Custodi Guard are. They can be basically invulnerable to a lot of our things, except for maybe our biggest Crusader squads, just because of how many attacks that we're throwing at them. So this kind of slows them down a little bit to help us gain the center of the board and allow us to establish ourselves before the Custodes or other armies get there. And then finally, you have your Whirlwind, which will generate Battle Shock. Always a great take. That's going to be important for opponents that hide their diddly little units that are really cheap. Your
But it's got a good gun.
Necrons.
It's a pretty good gun on there too. So
yeah, it's definitely good. So if you have a nasty infiltrator squad across from you,
yep,
plink them with the Whirlwind, or maybe it's Necron Warriors or Grots, something stupid
like that. Yep.
Yep. And finally, you got that assassin, the bane of everyone's existence, right? This thing's very tough to take out.
So, yeah. So overall, it's pretty mean list. There's a lot of pretty good combos here. Something to note that you may have noticed is he used the Black Templar Lancers, which do cost 15 points more per Lancer. So totaling an extra 30 points. Theoretically, you could use those 30 points if you wanted to drop that to, you know, put either like an enhancement on the other apothecary, or swap something out, for a more expensive unit, that kind of thing. So kind of dealer's choice on that. That is an option to gain, an extra 30 points, because we're not required to take the Black Templars version in the Gladius. That's a restriction of our detachment, not of our uh, not of our army in general, right? So,
Yep.
um, overall, obviously, this list leans heavily into the Desolation Squad and its ability to clear off enemy infantry, and use, like you said, the Thunderfire to slow down enemies. You got your indirect fire from it, and the Whirlwind. Area denial is important with this list to try to control the center. So you can see the synergies for sure with this list. So, with that being said, let's now take a look at what our Righteous Crusaders detachment looks like for us. So obviously, we have the restrictions that we talked about, before. We and of course we can't take witches, which why would you want to anyway?
That's why we didn't even mention them in the last one.
We didn't mention them. Theoretically, that's an option, but I think you're a heretic if you're including a witch in a Black Templar list. In any case, obviously, we have the vows. We've talked about these in previous videos. We're not going to go over them all here. You get 4 choices. You pick one at the beginning of the game, specifically at the start of the first battle round, and then it's in effect for the entire game for your whole army.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So, as what you'll note, obviously, we've talked about them before, but these are definitely either A, melee enhancements to our list, or they're giving durability to our units. So you can see that there is definite skew towards a
Towards
certain
melee,
style
you know,
of list.
as it should. We've also talked about on the live streams, and when the index was first revealed, our stratagems, all of which I think are pretty good. We compared a little bit some of them to the Gladius stratagems. Something to note with our stratagems for Righteous Crusaders is pretty much all of them focus on infantry, right?
Yep.
Fervent Acclamation targets a character, right? So you have to have a character attached to a unit. Devout Push is it's any Adeptus Astartes unit, but it's one that has had one or more of its models destroyed. So that doesn't work on a single model tank, right? No Escape is the target is one. This could be anything, right? So you could have use like a dreadnought or something to target this, to fall back from, prevent fallback from one of your opponent's units. So this one could be used on anything. Generally speaking, unless it's a dreadnought, you probably don't want that unit in combat with your tank anyway. Nor does it really matter, because in those circumstances, the tank or the vehicle or the walker can be shot anyway. So realistically, you're mostly using this on your infantry units. Armor of Contempt, this is the same as the other one. This one is going to be useful on your tanks for sure, as well as your infantry.
Yep.
Crusader's Wrath, same thing. This is a melee buff, focusing on your infantry. And then Vicious Riposte, again, similar to Devout Push. One of your units each time a model is destroyed, right? So all of these focus on infantry. Or have infantry as their primary target, right? So the big takeaway here is that if you are spamming tanks and dreadnoughts as part of your focus, and you have maybe only 1 or 2 melee infantry units, you might want to consider Gladius, right? This really pushes us towards a lot of units of infantry supported by characters. What's your take, Bob?
Yeah, I would say that that was mostly. I agree with that mostly. Um, yeah, and mostly that is the case. But I would say that our vow, uphold the honor of the emperor, does lend well into having vehicles with the 5 up
Sure.
leadership, and then the feel no pain of a 6 up. So that is something that is very beneficial for vehicles, but you just have to know that you're not going to get a ton of stratagem support out of it.
Right.
Um, but that's okay because a lot of vehicles don't necessarily need that stratagem support, and you can save it for your infantry that you
Yep.
have in your list.
Yep. Absolutely. So let's take a look at the enhancements. I feel like while none of them are quite as powerful as uh, the bolter discipline, that overall we have a better selection of our enhancements for our characters. So um, Perdition's Edge focuses specifically only on that character. So it's really just buffing a single character. Witch Seeker bolts does the same. However, it's really cheap. It's only 10 points, and for what you get, it gives the gun precision, anti-psyker 4+, and devastating wounds. This is really good if you're taking a Tech Marine to put on his Forge Bolter, because now you have a 24-inch gun that's Strength 5, AP 2, Damage 2 with 3 shots. You're not going to find a better gun to just get free precision and devastating wounds on, even if you never use the anti-psyker part of it, right?
Yep, exactly.
And then Sigismund's Seal and Tannhauser's Bones. These two are both, if you're in the respective vow, really powerful, right? So they buff the character that has it, as well as the character's unit, if you are in a specific vow. So Sigismund's Seal gives, if you have Accept Any Challenge up, it gives you crit hits on a 5+, and T-Bones, if you are in Uphold, gives that unit a Feel No Pain of 5+.
Yep. So the one thing to note is, Tannhauser Bone is our most expensive at 35 points. However, with the prevalence of precision, it is a very good take no matter what vow that you are in, simply
Yeah.
because we are taking characters for force multiplier abilities.
Yep.
And oftentimes, characters that are taken out early in the game will cripple your ability to do what you want to do in the board. It will destroy your synergies. So this is one of those takes that will help you survive at least 1 or 2 turns, hopefully more than you would normally, without having them dedicate a significant portion of their precision firepower towards killing that character. And if you happen to be in Uphold, then you just get a little bit more
Yeah.
additional play with it.
Especially because Fervent Acclamation requires a character to be the target. So, in order to buff that unit with a second vow, you've got to have, a character in it in order to target. So, that makes it something like this in a important squad, all that much more crucial.
Yep, exactly. So we've kind of talked a little bit about the stratagem themselves, but you can see how they do skew into the melee. It's
Mhm.
obviously a little bit more buffing towards uh, those particular phase and not as well rounded, but they do rely both the vows, enhancements, and our stratagems based on the vow that we have. But that's where we have fervent acclamation that will help a lot with a lot of those things, so we can get some of those synergies on different units. And we've talked about what's in the access with our units in like Premier Sword Brother and Crusader squads. We've had 2 recent videos on that and how they synergize with those particular things. Obviously, you want those units in the Black Templars, Righteous Crusader detachments to take advantage of these synergies where they do not have synergies in the Gladius detachment nearly as good. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, in Orion's list, it's the big Primaris Crusaders blob, and his synergy is based on Grimaldus and
Right.
the ability to allow him to stay into that Feel No Pain 5-up or that additional AP without having to utilize the Advance and Charge because he gets it from his detachment. But
Yeah.
beyond that, there's not a whole lot of synergies in the
And
list.
and even then, you miss out somewhat on there because something that a big Crusader blob with Grimaldus excels at, with his full rerolls to hit, is getting something like lethal hits or sustained hits, especially lethal hits with all those chain swords
Yeah,
in there to really punch up into something that they wouldn't normally be able to scratch. So, there's no way to get that squad lethal hits in the Gladius detachment. Whereas you can either be in that vow in for army wide for Righteous Crusaders, or you could utilize fervent acclamation to give it to them. Um, so yeah, again, you can see the synergy that's really built into making our melee units all that much more better than they would be otherwise on
yeah.
their own. So yeah, so let's take a look at this is one of Bob's lists that he's running Righteous Crusaders with. So Bob, why don't you take us through this list and tell us what we've got here.
All right. So I run 3 characters. I have the Judiciar, who, as we talked about, Tannhauser Bones. I don't always go and uphold, but when I do, that makes the unit much better. I have 2 company champions, Primaris, as I've talked about, and they combo with my 2 Black Templars and Pulsars and my Primaris Sword Brothers. So Primaris Sword Brethren, I always take the Mastercrafted Power Weapon and the Thunderhammer. I also take the Plasma Pistols and the Pyro Pistols because why not? But I do put those on my weaker guys, so to speak, to give them some extra punch. So I don't put any of that on my Mastercrafted because I don't want them to die, and it allows me to play around with allocation if I need to. Now I also have the Black Templar Gladiator Lancer. So in all of my games, the couple games that I played with not 2 Lancers, I regretted it immediately. So I am pretty much going to have those as a staple in every single one of my lists from here on out until they get nerfed. So they are just that good. I don't need to have any worry about putting anything with Oath of Moments with these guys. They just strength of Datasheet.
Yep,
Yeah, yes, it
they got
is.
their own rerolls.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it is more expensive than the Gladius version, but I kind of like the multi-melta, honestly. So these guys are going to be moving around the board, and eventually your opponent is going to get within that 18 inches and then have something else that I can shoot at them. Incidental D6 damage is nothing to sniff at. And the same thing with the impulsors. I like having the multi-meltas on it. It basically allows me to have, if you combine all those up, that is an Eradicator squad that is randomly strewn across the board. Like it's in multiple places around the board. So the other reason why I take the impulsors for my both my sword brethren and company champions, it allows me to basically become at least resistant against the Gladius combo. So
Yep.
imagine my units are sitting in the back. I don't have first turn, and that unit starts Desolation Squad unit is starting to blast my impulsor. I don't care because you're probably not going to kill it, even with all of your stratagems and builder discipline. It's not going to go down. So it allows my dangerous units to survive the onslaught of my opponent. And then I move it up the board and get to the middle, and then I don't care if it dies. So at that point, I'm where I need to be. And that's really kind of important for a lot of different units. So Imperial Guard, they do the same thing. They have to get through the Impulsor first. Are the Imperial Guard going to probably kill it? Yes, eventually. And a lot quicker pace. But again, then they have to get through that Impulsor before they can get to the Primary Swords brethren inside.
Exactly.
In addition, I have the Blade Guard Veteran Squad, so the Judiciar is going to be going with them. In earlier iterations of this list, I used a similar unit as Orion and had the Primaris Crusader Squad and Grimaldus. It's a little bit still experimental yet as far as this goes, but they hold the same role, hold the center of the board. Aerial denial. They got that fight first if something comes close. And then this really lends well into what they do well, and that is hold ground. They get there, they have the wounds, they have the storm shields, they will be able to strike first with that Judiciar and do the damage that they need to do. Now, do they strike up nearly as hard as the Primaris Crusader squad that I used to have in this? No, they don't, but it's significantly less points for a very similar role. I also take Infiltrator squads simply because Gene Stealers exist.
They're that good.
Yeah. So that's going to be an important piece to any list. I already talked about my Sword Brethren here. Something that is becoming very prevalent is the importance of the Sniper Scout squads. So these guys are very good simply because of that 12-inch they can't be shot. Now, I like them because they do the same thing in 9th edition as Infiltrators and Incursor do, giving you that concealed position infiltration, so they can get on a squat on those objectives right away.
Yeah.
Put them on there. Yes, that does put them in range quicker, but at least I can start generating points right away and get the shots that I need. If I need something dead that's a character, these guys are going to start shooting at it, and they will kill it. So, and finally, we have the Redemptor Dreadnoughts. So
the return of the Redemptors.
Now, I didn't initially like them, so to speak. Okay, let me revise that. I like Redemptors, but I didn't really care for their price point. So, but I've been watching the games of Space Marine players in general, and in particular, a lot of the Black Templar players in recent tournaments, especially the ones that have scored very highly, are running 2 Redemptors. So I felt like I wanted to try this, and we're going to be utilizing them in the list. But the data sheet's very good. You're going to be -1 on your damage to it, like it used to be. You have all of the weaponry that we know and love with them. And what the kicker was for me is not only do they allow you to get great shooting, which is something that we need in 10th edition, because you don't want to skew completely into melee. You will lose. I am telling you right now, you will lose in 10th edition as it currently stands if you skew completely into melee. Don't do it. But it also gives you the ability to be in melee with that unit, which is, I think, something that really plays into the Righteous Crusader detachment.
Yep.
So that gives me 5 units, not including characters, that are able to be in melee, but still give my list a really good amount of shooting. So they can be anti-infantry, they can also be anti-vehicle or monster or even elite infantry to combo with the Lancers. And then obviously you got the multi-meltas in the various vehicles. So that's my list. There's 16 units total. And It's a little bit
I
of
like it.
revision, but
I like the Redemptors in there. We kind of weren't too hot on them to start the edition. But I think I've been, and even in our Discord, I've been seeing a lot of folks saying, man, they're so durable, way more durable than I was expecting. That -1 damage is pretty rare now. So being able to, have access to that on a good chassis is valuable. The other thing that I like is that with plasma, the plasma on it, really no longer being sort of like something that you always want to point at vehicles. You can really take advantage of its blast against some larger elite infantry
yep.
because you're going to get those extra shots. So, you know, so yeah, it definitely has a lot of Black Templar flavor to it. A lot of units that really fit are on theme, and also can really utilize the synergies and the buffs that we offer.
So taking a step back, looking at the two different things, and getting back to the original question by Tom, um, really, when it boils down to it, uh, I kind of look at it like this. So the Gladius is the detachment that you want, a more balanced, well-rounded list that can do a lot of different things. So we're looking at it, you see it, you're like, hey, I can do a lot of things. I can play the game. I don't have to focus too terribly much on any particular thing. But because of that, I feel like the Gladius is not as Black Templar oriented as the Righteous Crusader squad is, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So now I'm not a player, a competitive player that typically cares necessarily about the lore. Well, obviously I care about the lore, or else I wouldn't be playing
How
them.
dare you, sir?
But I play units and styles of lists that helps me win.
Yeah.
I point to some of my older fifth edition lists, that Gunline Templars and such of that. But I feel like you don't get any of the flavor of the Black Templars necessarily with the Gladius, whereas
Miss out on a lot. That's for sure.
the Righteous Crusader is built towards it, and I don't necessarily think after the nerfs and with towering and a little bit on the indirect, that type of thing, I feel it's a lot more even. Right out of the gate, 10th edition was definitely shooting. You can do a lot more shooting damage with that indirect towering, obviously, that I just talked about, and do a lot of damage right away. Fate dice, knocking through those devastating wounds. You can kill way more stuff in the shooting phase before your opponent can get to you. A lot of that's been significantly nerfed, so the survivability is what it was advertised, right? Has much increased across the board simply
Yeah.
with those nerfs. Now, I point to Custodes. They are winning in close combat. They're not winning in the shooting phase, though they do have significant power in that, in some of their tanks that they can do shooting. So that's why you want to make sure that you have shooting in a list. But they win by holding the center of the board in close combat. That's how they win, and being durable.
Yep.
So while the Gladius does have some play in the shooting phase, I feel like you can still have a good shooting component running the Righteous Crusader squad, but your finishing needs to be in close combat. And the Gladius does not have a good way of doing that. You're
Yeah.
not going to have a finishing punch in the
You're relying
Gladius.
in the Gladius on the strength of the data sheet in melee alone, because there's not really much synergy. You got one, basically honor the chapter, one strat that really helps you in melee, and everything else is geared around other things. Sort of that jack of all, master of none, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I would agree. I think Righteous Crusaders is definitely a detachment that, one, obviously it has all the flavor, You really can't ask for more flavor with this thing. It's so steeped in our in the way that in the lore that we fight and things like that. Um, but it has those synergies and those buffs that really take our melee capabilities to the next level. But that's not to say that like our shooting is bad, because there are
Yeah.
still like shooting you can really, especially with certain data sheets like the Lancer, the Vindicator, some of these units you can get by on the strength of the data sheet alone, because they don't really need anything else. They're already very good.
Yep.
Obviously you miss out on the bolter discipline combo, but at the same time, you gain a lot more in the melee department. Um, so you can still have a Righteous Crusaders list with a fair amount of shooting and a fair amount of melee and infantry units, and be able to take down ranged stuff at ranged, or soften it up for your melee to finish it off, like you said.
I feel like going over a lot of the Space Marine data sheets as a whole, the shooting data sheets are a lot better than the melee ones in general for Space Marines.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, there's exceptions to the rules. So, like we talked about, the Premier Sword Brethren are exceptional melee, but that's a rare thing in what we have access to. There's a few other ones, so like the Blade Guard veterans are decent, as we talked about. Obviously, we have the Primaris Crusader squads and things of that nature, but we want to be able to punch up. We want to be able to trade. We want to be able to maximize or buff up, so to speak, a particular melee unit if we need to, because the shooting components of the datasheets are reasonably good already. We don't need to buff them up too much. And one of the things with the Gladius is you're relying on that one unit, that Death Star shooting unit, to do everything.
To do a lot
And
of
if
work.
it dies,
Then you're in trouble.
yeah, then you're relying on the datasheets.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not going to take you home, unfortunately. I mean, Oath of Moments, if that whiffs, where are you?
Yeah.
So being able to have access to either,
Or if you overkill.
or way overkill them. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Having access to that melee buff is a huge thing. Even if you are staying in a pulled, which gives you that durability bonus, which is a huge play, honestly.
Yeah.
A lot of my games, that's what I'm doing, because it is really good. There's a lot of, it hasn't been as much since early 10th release, where the Battle Shock comes into play, but that Leadership 5 plus is huge. And I mean, it's only a 16% chance to save wounds, but it's a 16% chance to save wounds. So that's really important.
Yeah. Another thing to consider too with your shooting is, there is synergies amongst the Space Marines data sheets to, improve your shooting. Things like incursors can give your other units a +1 to hit. Land speeder can give blast weapons +1 to hit and ignores cover. So there are synergies amongst just the generic Space Marine data sheets that improve your synergies that are regardless of what detachment you're in, right? So you can. It's not like we have no access to shooting buffs. We have the same access as most everyone else does too. Just it may require including a slightly different unit, or adding this unit or that unit to your list.
A lot of lists are taking small units. In the previous list that Orion had, there's infiltrator squads, right? In the Gladius, they're just terrible in melee. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In a Righteous Crusader unit, you can make them, if you're in the correct vow, you can at least potentially do something. If you're in like sustained hits, you're going to generate some more hits. Not obviously, you're not going to do like a billion extra hits, 1 or 2 extra hits, but it's 1 or 2 extra hits. Or obviously, you can generate uh, lethal hits doing that way, so you get some wounds through. So where you can have those units that are just not very good in melee become at least halfway decent.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about too.
Units like Phobos, Reavers, doing the Phobos Lieutenant, the deep strike in, shoot and fade to get closer and charge in. We can give them an extra pip of AP for their precision weapons to help them, get through and kill that character that's in that squad, or kill a few extra bodies
Yep.
that they wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, so that's the video, guys. I think the answer to the question. What should we skew into? Should we skew into a more melee centric traditional Templar list? Or should we run Gladius? Should we run Righteous Crusaders? I think the answer is really depends on your list, right? We've talked about a couple of archetype lists that favor one detachment or the other. Um, you know, so the answer to which one is better is a bit list dependent. So I think if we are just looking at the detachments themselves, I feel like Righteous Crusaders has more synergy with what we want to do as a chapter with our unique units that are unique to us. But Gladius certainly has play, depending on your list. So, any final thoughts on that, Bob?
So I will note, though, that the Black Templars players that have been more successful, obviously we haven't won any tournaments yet, but we have had some higher finishes in our list and some reasonably decent win-loss ratings. But if you dig into the lists that have done well with the Black Templars are running Righteous Crusaders. The lists that are running the Gladius detachments are the ones that are under 500. So you can find those things on Vesco's pairings, but I did some research on this, and it is very prevalent on the lists that the win loss is much higher with the Righteous Crusader detachment. So I
Take
think
that for
that's
what you will.
yeah.
So let us know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you agree with us? Do you not agree with us? Do you, are you having more success with one over the other if you've been running both? Let us know what detachment you prefer. We want your thoughts and opinions too. Don't forget also to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you click the bell notification so that you can get notified on all of our latest content. Please check out our Discord. We have a really awesome Discord with a lot of active folks every day talking about different strategies and things like that. A really great community of people willing to help everyone, whether you're a veteran or a new player. And then, of course, please check out our Patreon. We have a lot of really awesome benefits to our Patreon. We've got you can see our new exclusive Patreon dice, only available to purchase through our patron code. So come check out all the great benefits that we have to offer there. Plus, you're supporting the channel at the same time. We greatly appreciate all of the support that all of our patrons have given us. And big again, shout out to Tom. He's one of our Castellan level patrons for a great question to sort of kick off this video with. So until next time, keep on crusading.